Welcome back to my garden. If you watched my last video, you will probably recall that it ended somewhat abruptly. Film cut off due to a full memory, and that was down to, well, some unintended downloads. And, well, that's life. It's not the first time it's happened to me, and it wasn't the end of the world. I think I made the points I wanted to make. And this is and always will be an unedited, rough and ready channel. So what you see is what you get, or one take fits all, some sort of cliche. Throw it in. However, again, if you didn't see that video, and even if you did, it's probably worth doing a very brief sort of lead-in summary, because this is essentially a second part. And I'm apologising in advance. The same old story, the floods, the flocks, I don't know what the word is. Loads and loads and loads of little small annoying insects post-rain. But that's just how it is here from, I suppose, February through to May. You just got to deal with it. Anyway, back to the video. So, I was looking at a question of if one examines the areas where one has some sort of constructive output in your life, it's interesting to compare your success across those different areas and perhaps learn something where when you try and explain why you're more successful in some areas of your life than others. In my case, I was looking at, or I have been looking at, my art career as opposed to, in the bigger sense, my two book projects. The one is built around self-actualization, becoming the person of your dreams. The other is about my long-term goal and path towards chess mastery, whatever that might mean. And although I've made progress with both these books, it is considerably less than the impressive strides, if I'm blowing my own trumpet, that I've made in becoming a professional artist. I'm not self-sustaining. I don't live from my art, but my output has increased in amount and in quality, as too have my sales. So I'm moving in the right direction and taking steps towards a long-term goal of creating a sculpture park and an art gallery which will be of sufficient repute that people come from far and wide to see it. Anyway, there we go. I am making very positive moves in that direction. And I started thinking, how did all that come about? And a lot of things happened that facilitated it. And I think one of the key elements is when I look at my sort of journey in terms of exhibiting my art, it was a series of steps that were, I suppose you could say, opportunistic. I'd meet someone who had a hostel, and I had a small exhibition there, and then I, through that person, met someone else who was an artist. She introduced me, we became friends. He was setting up an exhibition and invited me to join him in a small museum in a nearby town. People saw that exhibition. One of them stopped off at the house on the way back to Fortaleza, and invited me to visit his studio in Fortaleza. I went there. I met his cousin, who's a tattoo artist but has a cultural space. I did an exhibition there. I met someone who was starting an art gallery, and so it went on. Meeting curators and other artists, starting to go to art events, and kind of piece by piece, my art professional side of my art career sort of expanded here in the States. Meanwhile, my actual art production started out of a very modest goal. I had difficulties with power supply, so I wasn't welding. I suffered from a sort of imposter syndrome, so I decided I wanted to learn a little bit more formally about art. So I started looking at how you learn to, art is in essence figurative, how you learn to draw realistic human figures. I came across Andrew Loomis, the late Andrew Loomis, a famous art illustrator and teacher at the Art Students League, and I had a kind of epiphany moment where I thought I could take his method that involves sort of geometrization of a human face to enable you to get proportions and positionings, correct positions, and you do these circles, a circle, a two-thirds circle, and then draw lines and horizontal and vertical axes, and this enables you to position eyes, nose, mouth, and so forth. Now, it struck me one day that I could make a three-dimensional model of that framework and then build my head on top of it and then sort of deconstruct the framework. And the result was amazing. It was a sort of taking the guesswork out of what I was trying to do. And I did one head and then I did another one. And little by little, they improved. I got very positive feedback at the exhibitions. I suppose a big game changer for me in terms of my art development, if I'm being truly honest, was the whole COVID scenario. And I doubled down and started writing out my method for a book that never really saw the light of day. Maybe it will one day. But to do that, I made dozens of masks. In the end, that formed a sort of installation piece, 19 masks, COVID, 19, it all fits together rather nicely. And meanwhile, the pieces got larger and other ideas came to mind, and prototype pieces were shown in later exhibitions, and it was all a sort of bootstrapping process, and all the while receiving feedback and encouragement from people around me. And as people would come to the gallery, I met one collector, and that started to sort of feed off itself, that process. And so there's no denying in a lot of this, there's a sort of, as I say, I think the right word is opportunistic. There's a luck element, a serendipity element, that stuff happened and I was able to take advantage of it. There wasn't a grand plan. There were kind of long-term dreams and goals and some sort of vision of what a monumentally successful piece might look like. And I was iterating and working towards that. And if I look at, by way of comparison, what is difficult about, and for the sake of this video, let me just simplify it, writing a book. It is a very big thing. And yes, you can break it down into small individual chapters. And you can break it down into a daily writing exercise. I will do 2 pages today. And stick with it for a year, and you will have a rough draft of 700 plus pages, and then you begin an editing process, and the same thing happens, and you have a book, and then you look at how you might go about publishing it. And I can see how you can break down this enormous task of writing a book into small bite-sized pieces, and if you stick with them, you'll get there. And in some sense, that is similar to, if I look back, what has happened with my art. Except there is a very, very big difference. Each of the small steps in the art are ends in themselves. The first Loomis-based head study involved spending 2 hours to produce the metal framework, probably 2 days of work to produce the head. And then I had a head that amazed me, that it was, I think I've gone well beyond it now, and I look back at it with fond memories. But if you ask me honestly, in some objective sense, it's vastly inferior to what I'm doing now. I think it stands up, and I can see why I liked it then. And I can see why I was excited, but I moved beyond it. But the point was, I was excited, and when I showed it to people, they were wowed too, because they didn't know what was going to come next. They'd only seen that one. So it was a sort of 3-day process that had a start, middle, and an end, that had feedback and encouragement, and then fed into a sort of the next stage of the process. And I think, in a nutshell, that is the big problem with a lot of major undertakings, things like writing a book, that you look at it and it's a daunting process, and you have to sign up without any real return for a lot more than 2 or 3 days. And it's very hard to maintain that sort of momentum. You can work on building habits and on theories about personal productivity and all sorts of things. And you might, as you go along, find people that will encourage you in the process. People have encouraged me through this channel, which is why this story hasn't ended. But I can see that is a profound, massive difference in terms of building an art career, and actually building many careers. If I think of becoming a teacher, and I think of the end sort of that I reached at my time in the teaching profession, when I'd accomplished certain things, and I was a deputy head in a well-respected senior school, and I was well-regarded in my school. But each year was an end in itself. When I was a rank-and-file teacher, in fact, before then, when I was a non-qualified teacher, a stand-in, a student, there were little goals that objectives that you could aim towards, little milestones. And you can make those up with something like a book project. But you are making them up, and you know you're making them up. And I think that is, that's, for me, a big, big difference between my art and the other projects I've been undertaking. Now, what to do about it is another question. And perhaps there's a lot more to it than what I've shared in this video. I'll think about it. I'll watch the video again, and maybe that'll jog my memory. Perhaps I've already thought about other points, but the flocks of rather irritating insects have distracted me. Who knows? Certainly, feel free to suggest possibilities and lines of attack in the comments below. I'd love to hear your opinion. And who knows, perhaps there'll be something new to add to this particular line of inquiry next week. But until then, I do hope your lives are filled with joy, and whatever you're undertaking is moving in the right direction, and that you are getting the encouragements and the intermediate successes that you need and so richly deserve, I'm sure. So that's it from sunny Brazil. Until next week,